episode of the BioHub. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Harith Rajagopalan, who's the CEO and co-founder of Fractyl Health, a biotech company pioneering a new approach to treating the root causes of metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes and obesity. Under his leadership, Fractyl has grown from a bold idea into a clinical stage company, tackling some of the biggest health challenges. So join us today as Harith talks us through his story, the obesity space, and Fractyl's journey. So Harith, thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
Excellent, Tom. Thanks. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So let's kick it off with a little bit about yourself then. So can you talk us through your journey and what inspired you to pursue a career in the biotech industry?
Sure. I never would have thought that I would be in the biotech industry, honestly. I was an MD, Ph.D. scientist and a cardiologist at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston when my dad and my uncle were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And these are two smart people working hard, doing what they thought was the right thing in their lives, getting diagnosed with the disease. And I saw how they tried to keep taking their medicines and diet and exercise, but their disease kept progressing. And that really frustrated me, this notion that they were doing all of the right things, but the disease kept advancing and putting them at risk. And in my clinical practice as a cardiologist, I used to see a lot of people with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, and really got me thinking, because of my personal experience with family members, what is going on that's causing so many people to develop these diseases, and why are our medicines not fully solving the problem? And what I realized is we have all of these medicines that we're using to try to manage the symptoms of obesity and type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, but we're really not fixing what's fundamentally going wrong in the body that's causing people to develop and progress these diseases over time. And that's what began to inspire me to try to think about what is the root cause of obesity and type 2 diabetes in the body? What is going wrong that is causing people to develop these diseases, and what can we do about it? And it's that simple question that led us to begin to think radically differently about obesity and metabolic disease, and to start Fractyl Health.
Okay, awesome. And you mentioned it a little bit there, but can you share the origin story behind Fractyl Health? What was the inspiration behind its founding? You mentioned it a little bit there, but yeah.
So I actually had a patient who was in my practice who underwent a surgery called bariatric surgery. And this was an individual whom we all felt really didn't care about his health. He was overweight, he had cardiovascular disease, he had type 2 diabetes, a number of sort of coexisting fellow traveling metabolic problems. And efforts to admonish him by warning him of the dangers of disease progression and complications, to try to eat healthier and be more adherent to his prescribed medicines, really were not meeting with success. But he underwent a bariatric surgery. I went to see him in the hospital 3 days after the surgery, and the hospital had delivered a tray with a hamburger and French fries for a guy 3 days out from this gut-altering surgery. And he just pushed it away in front of me, and he said, "I'm not interested in this. This is not appealing to me anymore." And even by day 3, this person with very poorly controlled type 2 diabetes had already had normal blood sugars and didn't need to restart his diabetes medicines. And then when I saw him in clinic again, 3 months later, he had begun to lose a substantial amount of weight. Now, this is an incredible finding, because you're doing this operation on the gut. You're not touching the pancreas. You're not touching the brain directly. And yet he doesn't have an appetite for unhealthy foods. He's losing weight without trying, and his blood sugar has totally normalized, and he's not taking any of his medicines anymore. So it got me wondering, what is going on that this surgery did that's fixing something so profoundly fundamental to why he developed obesity and diabetes in the first place? And that led to the realization that the gut is a hugely important regulator of the body's metabolic control systems. And we are only beginning to scratch the surface in our understanding of how the gut talks to the brain in order to help the brain regulate blood sugar and body weight. But what we do know is that the gut plays a huge role. And what we also know is that high fat, high sugar diets cause changes to the lining of the gut, particularly in the first portion of the gut called the duodenum, that is causing a neural and a hormonal change in the body, which leads to obesity and diabetes. So the founding idea was to actually go to friends and colleagues at a venture capital firm and ask them, what would be the clinical and economic value of figuring out a way to reverse obesity and type 2 diabetes by fixing its root cause in the gut rather than managing the symptoms for someone for the rest of their lives? It turns out that like 50% of people have inadequately controlled disease with type 2 diabetes. Most people with obesity, even though they have GLP-1 drugs today, stop taking those drugs within a year, and so therefore really don't achieve clinical benefit from GLP-1 drugs. And so there's this huge population of people who are living with the risk of progression of metabolic disease, where they really could benefit from something that's changing the trajectory of disease by fixing the root cause. And that's what we're going after with the programs at Fractyl Health.
Interesting. Cool. And I mean, in the obesity space at the moment, there's been some pretty big fundraising rounds over the past 12 rounds in that market. I'm going to break this next question into two different bits. So can you talk us through your perspective of the obesity space and why it is such a crowded market at the moment? And then the second point would be like the differentiation of Fractyl, like what sets you guys apart when looking to address a critical unmet need.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. A few years ago, Novo Nordisk got semaglutide approved, first as Ozempic for type 2 diabetes, and then Wegovy for obesity. And that then led to this massive explosion in the interest in GLP-1 drugs for the treatment of obesity, which I would say has kickstarted this gold rush effect in biotech to try to find new approaches in obesity. What we know are that these GLP-1 drugs are amazing medicines that mimic a natural hormone in the body called GLP-1, but are weekly injectable therapies that can achieve a lot of weight loss. But what we also know is that these medicines are not perfect. They are hard to titrate. They take a long time to get up to a therapeutic dose, many, many months. They can cause a lot of side effects. And particularly a lot of people have a hard time getting up to a dose that works for them because they start to experience nausea or vomiting or other typically GI related side effects. And even though these drugs work really well in phase 3 clinical trials, they're not proving to work nearly as well in the real world because a lot of people can't get to the full dose or can't stay on these medicines lifelong. And the major problem that has emerged is that when people stop taking these GLP-1 drugs, they regain weight very, very rapidly and almost immediately lose whatever clinical metabolic benefit they had while they were on the drugs in the first place. So where do you see the landscape shifting? Like the unmet need is moving in a lot of different directions. Some people think that what we need are oral versions of these injectables that can move fast, and Eli Lilly is taking a lead in developing those. There are people who are looking at new mechanisms of weight loss that target different pathways, and that's another approach that people are taking. Where we are differentiated is that we've been asking, how do you lock in these benefits in a way that doesn't force people to have to stay on medicines for the rest of their lives? If these medicines are as good as they are, which they clearly are, but people can't stay on them, can you change the body's physiology so that they don't need to be on them anymore? And so with our lead asset, which is called Revita, what we are doing is we are fixing the portion of the gut called the duodenum that I mentioned earlier, that is a main driver of why people develop obesity in the first place. We are performing a 40-minute outpatient procedure delivered by a gastroenterologist that targets this region of the gut and aims to reset the abnormal metabolic signals that are coming from this portion of the gut that were caused by someone eating an unhealthy diet for all of their lives. It's kind of like wiping the slate clean by removing and replacing their duodenal lining so that the normal metabolic signals can be restored. And that product, Rejuva, is in a pivotal study in the United States for weight maintenance after stopping GLP-1 drugs. That study is called Remain-1, and it's an incredibly exciting clinical study because it's potentially the first therapeutic approach that would offer patients the ability to maintain body weight loss in a durable manner, even without needing to stay on medicines. Nothing like that exists today. And we've been enrolling this study. It's been moving incredibly fast. We first identified this opportunity in November of 2023. We've gotten approval from the FDA just a few months later to begin this pivotal study. And then by the summer of last year, the FDA had granted breakthrough device designation for Rejuva for weight maintenance after GLP-1 discontinuation. And the reason we think we got breakthrough designation is because people are now more concerned about how do you maintain body weight loss for people who need to stop medicines than how do you get more body weight loss. Like, the maintenance of the body weight has become the big concern. We've been enrolling this trial since August, and it's enrolled at historically fast rates. And we're excited to say that we're nearly complete in enrolling the pivotal study, and we're seeing some encouraging open label data so far. More open label data is coming in June, and then a key randomized data set from the Remain-1 study is expected in Q3. That'll be the first randomized proof of whether Rejuva can achieve weight maintenance after stopping a GLP-1 drug. And so we're very excited about that.
Interesting. Good. And I mean, you guys are now in the clinic. You're primarily focused on treating T2D and obesity. You mentioned a little bit about the data then. Can you talk us through the pipeline as a whole and a little bit more just into the recent data that was announced?
Absolutely. So the Rejuva asset is our lead asset, and I mentioned the main studies that are going on there are open label studies and randomized studies in discontinuation of GLP-1 drugs and weight maintenance thereafter. What we just announced at the beginning of April are some early 1-month data from patients who had been on tirzepatide, which is one of these most powerful GLP-1 drugs, but then needed to stop the drug for whatever reason, and then were followed thereafter. And what we're beginning to see in patients who've been followed at 1 and 3 months after stopping tirzepatide is that they seem to be able to be protected from the type of weight regain that is normally associated with stopping tirzepatide. And so what's very exciting about that is it's a first glimpse into data that maybe there's a way to lock in weight loss without needing to stay on tirzepatide or similar drugs, which I think is exciting because it provides hope to potentially millions of people who just want to live a life at a lower weight without having to work at it constantly, which is what the disease of obesity means to them today. The thought of persistent ability to maintain a lower body weight, I think, is a massive unmet need. I would argue it is the highest aspiration of people who struggle with obesity today and would have profound consequences for their metabolic risks down the line if you were able to allow them to keep a lower body weight just in a physiologic, natural manner. Behind this, we have an incredibly exciting pipeline that essentially leverages our historical experience in developing advanced therapies targeting the gut. And we've got a platform for pancreatic gene therapy called Rejuva, which delivers AAV gene therapy directly into the pancreas. And we will be presenting an oral presentation at the upcoming Gene and Cell Therapy meeting in May. When we go, what we're going to show is the body of work that we have done preclinically to test a smart GLP-1, a one-time therapeutic administration of a gene therapy that allows the body to make GLP-1 in a way more physiologic manner than the drugs that are out there today. It's natural, native human GLP-1, and it is released from the pancreas as and when the body needs it, and it mimics the body's own GLP-1, the same GLP-1 that you make or I make. And in preclinical studies so far, our one-time GLP-1 has better durability and potency, and we think is likely to be better tolerated than the GLP-1s that exist today. So in Revita, we have a product that can offer a way to keep the weight off if you can't stay on a GLP-1. And with Rejuva, we've got something that will be entering the clinic in the very near future that is designed to maintain GLP-1 benefits for life. And we're very excited about both of them and the data that we've been generating with both, but also we're super excited about the upcoming catalysts from both of these programs in the coming quarters.
Yeah, sounds exciting. And then this is, I guess, separate to the science of Fractyl, but back to you. So as a first-time CEO and co-founder, how did you find it in the early stages of setting up Fractyl? I know that was your first time as CEO. How was that? And I guess the second bit, I speak to people all the time that I guess one day would like to be CEO or have their own company. What advice would you give to maybe up-and-coming biotech entrepreneurs as well?
Well, I'll start with the second question, which is, what advice do I would say, I think it's really valuable to start with the problem that you're trying to solve and make sure that it's a deeply meaningful and personal problem for you, like obesity and type 2 diabetes is for me because of what I told you about the founding of the company. Yeah. And the second thing that I would say is that you have to understand yourself, what your strengths are, and how those strengths can be brought to bear in order to help advance that idea in as selfless a way as possible. There are so many ways in which a founder can help ensure that a therapy becomes available to patients, depending on their background, their skills, and their experiences. That vision of what you can bring to patients and the change that you can bring that may help people live healthier, better lives is so crucially important and so valuable for a founder. But you can do that from a lot of different seats within the company based on whatever you're best at. Now, what I learned through this process is that I'm so passionate about what we're trying to accomplish for patients that I couldn't imagine staying at the Brigham and doing my day-to-day work as a cardiologist. I had to pursue it full time. And then I had to learn that the job of a CEO is to articulate a vision for the world that you're trying to create. And the vision that we're trying to create is a world where people are leading healthier lives, free of obesity and type 2 diabetes, where we're developing therapies that have the potential to prevent and reverse disease rather than simply manage them. I felt like that was a compelling enough vision for us and for the entire company. Then you got to rally people behind that vision. You got to rally dollars behind that vision. You got to make sure you're executing against that vision. And I feel like I've had to learn how to do those things because you don't really learn how to do those things when you're rounding on cardiovascular patients in the ICU every day. So it was a steep learning curve, but I'm really glad that I did it.
Good. And this is a question that we always finish with on the BioHub, and I know I gave you a heads up on this, but
you did, and I totally forgot what the heads up was, but so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So it was, if you were to have dinner with 3 people, past or present, who would they be and why? They don't necessarily need to be biotech innovators, although they can, if you like. But yeah, 3 people for dinner. Who would it be and why?
Right. Okay. So 3 people for dinner. I mean, I would love in the current world to have dinner with Elon Musk because I really want to understand how his brain functions and whatever you might think about him, the fact that he has built so many incredibly successful businesses and been so bold in his vision is something that I deeply admire. So he's number 1. A second person whom I'd like to have dinner with is the Dalai Lama. The reason I like to have dinner with him is because he's under tremendous pressure for his religion and the people who follow him. And he carries himself with like such composure and a sense of calm. He has figured out how to hack the stresses of life in a way that I think is like deeply inspiring. I think it would be great to have dinner with him. I'm going to pause and think about who my third one is. Okay, give me a second. Okay. I'd like to have dinner with my dad, who's no longer with us today and wasn't able to see the company that we've been building and the work that we've been doing that he inspired. And I would love to be able to bring him back and show him what we're doing and just share that with him.
Yeah. Well, look, there was 3 terrific answers there. And I think just hearing not only the obesity space, but your personal journey to get to where you are today is super inspiring. So I think it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, Harith. Thanks so much for helping us out with it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tom.